The first thing you feel isn't pain. It's recognition. Something inside you opens like a wound that was always there, waiting. The battlefield fades. The screams, the last fire, the smell of burning promethium. And in the silence that follows, you hear your own heartbeat answered by another. It pulses beneath your thoughts, vast and hungry, a presence older than the stars. You try to speak, to pray, to remember your name, but the words melt away like wax. A whisper slides through your mind, soft as breath, heavy as eternity. You called to me. In that moment, you understand the truth every priest fears to name. Demons do not invade. They are invited. They wait for the cracks in the soul, for the doubt behind devotion, for the pain that faith could not heal. And when they find it, they do not enter, they return. Your blood begins to glow. The air tastes like copper and ash. You see your own reflection and it smiles before you do. The war is over. You've already lost. If you can still hear your own voice, remember this warning. Share it before it's gone. Subscribe your vigilance to this descent, for what you're about to witness isn't legend. It's the anatomy of damnation. War had hollowed Oren Vale long before the demon found him. He had fought across 17 worlds for the Astra Militarum, his regiment broken and rebuilt more times than he could remember. The war never ended. It only changed shape. 1 month he drowned in the mud of Cadrex 9. The next he burned in the dust storms of Carthena. Every time he woke from a bombardment, there were fewer faces left around the fire, fewer names to remember. He stopped counting the dead because the numbers meant nothing anymore. Even the prayers meant nothing. The chaplain's sermons echoed through the trenches each dawn, the same words repeated until they became sound without meaning. The Emperor protects. But Oren had seen what the Emperor protected, an idea, not the men who bled for it. He carried his sigil on his armor, etched by his own knife, but it felt like mockery now. The Aquila caught the light of distant explosions and looked like a wound. He still prayed, of course. Every soldier did. But his prayers had turned into bargains. Let me live until dawn, he would whisper. Let me die before I break. Sometimes he thought the Emperor listened. Other times he felt only the silence of a god who had forgotten his servants. It began in the quiet between artillery barrages, when the world should have been asleep but never was. Oren sat alone in the trench, lays gun across his knees, staring at the horizon where the flares had stopped falling. The air was too still. The smoke hung motionless, glowing faintly with the afterburn of phosphorus. He thought he saw shapes in it, shadows moving against the light. He blinked and they vanished. Then came the voice. It wasn't external. It didn't come from the vox or the wind. It came from inside his skull, as familiar as his own thought. You've done enough, it whispered. Rest. He froze. The voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't even commanding. It was gentle. They've forgotten you, Oren, it said. But I haven't. He tried to stand, to call out to the sentry beside him. But there was no sentry. The trench was empty. The only sound was his breath echoing through his rebreather grill. He reached for his rosarius and found it cracked, the bead slick with mud. The whisper came again. Closer now, soft as a memory. Do you know why you fight? He wanted to answer. He wanted to say, for the Emperor, but the words caught in his throat. The silence between his heartbeats stretched until it became something physical, thick, alive, watching. Then, in the smoke, he saw her, a figure walking toward him across the no-man's land. No armor, no mask, no weapon. Just a woman, her form shimmering in the phosphor light. She looked human, impossibly so. Her eyes were bright and wet, her mouth trembling with something like pity. Oren raised his laser gun, but his hands shook. The air around her pulsed, rippling like heat haze. Don't be afraid, she said. Her voice was the same one he'd heard in his head. He should have fired. He should have called for backup. Instead, he lowered the rifle. No one ever tells you that the first step toward damnation feels like relief. She reached out her hand, and when her fingers brushed his cheek, the world exhaled. The mud no longer smelled of decay. The smoke turned to light. The pounding of his heart slowed until it matched hers. For the first time in years, Oren Vale felt peace, and in that fragile peace something smiled through her eyes. Not human, not divine, but waiting. When Oren awoke, he was still in the trench, but the world had changed. The light was wrong, too soft, too steady. Dawn had come without the usual thunder of bombardment. The air smelled clean, untouched by promethium or blood. For a brief, impossible instant, he thought the war was over. Then he noticed the silence. Not absence of sound, silence with weight like a hand pressed over the mouth of the world. He stood slowly, his laser gun still beside him. The horizon shimmered, unreal. The mud at his feet reflected the sky, and his reflection stared back with unfamiliar eyes. He blinked. The face in the water blinked later. He stumbled back, heart hammering, breath fogging the inside of his mask. Then he heard her again. "You asked for peace, Oren." The voice was closer now, not whispering, but woven through the air. He looked up. She stood at the trench's edge, framed by the faint glow of a dead sun. Her feet didn't touch the mud. Her robes shifted like smoke, and every motion left a trail of embers in the air. Yet she looked at him with such terrible tenderness that he forgot to be afraid. "I don't understand," he managed. His own voice sounded small. "What are you?" She tilted her head, smiling as if at a child. "What you wanted to hear." She moved closer, her presence filling the trench. His breath caught. The air shimmered. He felt her inside him before her hand touched his chest, warmth spreading through his armor into his veins. Every ache, every scar, every tremor of exhaustion vanished. The constant noise of fear went quiet. "You're not real," he said, though even as he spoke the words he wished they weren't true. "You prayed," she whispered, "and I answered." Her voice pressed through him like water through sand. He saw flashes and battlefields turned to glass, soldiers kneeling before her in worship, blood transformed into gold. In each image, her form shifted, sometimes angelic, sometimes monstrous, sometimes both at once. He saw himself among them, smiling through fire. He stumbled back. "No, the Emperor does not hear you." Her words cut deeper than any blade. He felt something in him break, that last fragile thread of faith that had held him upright through years of horror. And as it broke, something vast and ancient poured in. The ground trembled. The trench walls bled light. Oren screamed, but the sound twisted in his throat. The light seeped into his eyes, his mouth, his lungs, until he was nothing but breath and fire. He fell to his knees as the sky split open above him, bleeding color like a wound. In the light, her true form unfolded. Wings that were not wings. A face that was not a face. Beauty stretched beyond sanity. Every part of her shimmered with patterns that refused understanding. Oren saw them, and something inside him wept with awe. "Let go," she said. "You've served long enough." He wanted to resist, to fight, to scream her name, but she had none. She was legion and silence and song. As her radiance consumed him, the world around him burned away. The trench, the war, the sky, all reduced to memory. Only her voice remained, warm and patient, whispering through the dark. "Sleep now, Oren. The pain is over." And for the first time in years, he obeyed. The commissar found him at dawn, still kneeling in the mud, his eyes open and glowing faintly gold. His lips moved soundlessly, forming words that did not belong to any known tongue. By the time they dragged him back to camp, half the regiment had begun to dream of her too. They said Oren was lucky to be alive. The medic found him kneeling in the trench, still breathing, though his heart had stopped for nearly a minute. When they pulled the mask from his face, his eyes reflected a dull gold shimmer that no light could explain. They sent him to the rear lines for observation, a word that meant interrogation wrapped in pity. He did not remember being carried away. He remembered only the sound, the voice that was not a voice, humming behind his ribs like a second heartbeat. It had not left when he woke. It waited, patient, breathing with him. The inquisitorial medici questioned him for hours. What had he seen? Was there witchcraft, sorcery, psychers? Did he hear the enemy whisper? Oren said no. Again and again, no. He knew what they would do if he said yes. But each time he lied, the voice inside him warmed like a hidden coal. "They don't understand you," it murmured. They never did. When he was released back to his regiment, the world felt distant. Every sound came a second late, every color too bright. The soldiers noticed. They laughed about it at first. Old Oren's finally cracked. But they stopped laughing when he began to predict shell strikes before they fell. He didn't think. He just knew. The world seemed transparent now, its patterns visible in ways that defied logic. He could see the paths bullets would take, the places where men would die before they fell. It was intoxicating and terrifying. At night, the dreams returned. The woman, or the thing that wore her shape, spoke to him from beyond the veil of sleep. Her voice dripped like warm oil through the dark. "I'm close now," she said. "You don't have to fight anymore. Just let me in." He tried to pray, but the words burned in his mouth. His mind felt split between two fires, one cold and loyal, the other warm and alive. He thought of the Emperor's statues, perfect, unyielding, silent, and realized he could no longer remember what faith had ever felt like. One night, as the camp burned around him under enemy bombardment, Oren found himself standing amid the chaos untouched. Shells burst overhead, shrapnel hissed through the air, but none of it reached him. The voice was no longer whispering. It was singing, a low, resonant harmony that drowned the war's noise. He looked up and saw her again, walking through the fire. Her eyes glowed with colors that should not exist, her smile tender, almost sorrowful. "You've already opened the door," she said. "You just haven't stepped through." The air folded. The sound of artillery twisted into melody. Oren fell to his knees as his veins began to glow beneath his skin, every heartbeat a pulse of light. He screamed, not in pain, but revelation. He could see her world now, a place of endless forms and shifting light where beauty and horror were one. He understood that the demon was not outside him anymore. It was inside, unfurling like a second soul. And as the war raged above, two voices spoke within one body, their words indistinguishable from prayer. By the third night, Oren no longer slept. He drifted between waking and dream, the barrier between the two dissolving like smoke. He spoke less, ate little. When he looked at his comrades, he saw not faces but outlines of light and shadow, fragile shapes tethered to flickering threads. He realized that every life around him burned at a different brightness. Some were dim with fear, others sharp with hatred, all destined to go out. The voice within him pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. It no longer whispered. It breathed through him. Every inhale tasted of copper and honey. Every exhale left a trace of ash in the air. At times he thought he heard words beneath it, a language older than sound. Other times it was simply emotion, sorrow, desire, hunger, emotions so vast they felt holy. On the fourth night, he dreamt of the Emperor. The God Emperor sat upon his throne, eyes burning like dying suns. Oren knelt before him, trembling. "I have failed," he said. "I have listened to another." The Emperor did not move. His mouth opened, but the words that came were not his. "You did not fail. You were abandoned." Oren woke screaming. The medici came running. He attacked them without thinking. Their blood splattered across the walls like liquid fire, glowing for an instant before fading. His eyes shone brighter now, veins flickering beneath the skin. He heard her voice again. "I am here. Let me carry it. Let me carry you." He staggered through the camp, the ground shifting beneath him as though reality itself recoiled. Soldiers tried to stop him, but every weapon jammed, every round misfired. The air warped around him, rippling with heat and distortion. He reached the edge of the encampment, where the shattered remains of a cathedral jutted from the earth like broken ribs. He stepped inside. The roof was gone, the altar half buried in rubble. A cracked aquila hung above the pulpit, its wings blackened by fire. He stared at it, breath shaking, until he saw her reflection glimmering across the stone. Faint. Perfect. Waiting. "I can't," he whispered. "I'm afraid." "You already did," she answered. Light poured from the cracks in the walls. The stones wept molten gold. Oren felt his body lift, his armor melting into his flesh, his bones reshaping under pressure that was both agony and ecstasy. He screamed, but the sound rose like music, a note too pure for human throats. His heart stopped, started again, beating to a rhythm not his own. When the survivors entered the ruins at dawn, they found him kneeling before the altar, surrounded by ash that had once been men. His skin shimmered like liquid brass, his eyes twin embers. He turned toward them slowly, lips curling in a serene, almost grateful smile. "She's coming," he said, his voice layered with something vast and inhuman. And behind him, the air trembled, as though the veil itself had begun to breathe. They found Oren kneeling in the ruins for the second time that week. His hands were clasped, his head bowed as if in prayer. Around him the air shimmered with heat, though the fires had long since died. The medici said it was shock. The commissar said it was witchcraft. But the priest who looked into Oren's eyes said nothing at all. He just backed away and crossed himself until his fingers bled. When they brought him back to the field camp, the men avoided him. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't speak, yet the machines reacted to him. Auspex readings flickered, Vox units crackled with ghost voices when he walked past. The tech priest called it a localized psychic anomaly. The soldiers called it a curse. On the sixth night, Oren's flesh began to change. It started as a fever, the kind that made the world tilt. Colors blur, thoughts melt into hallucination. His pulse thundered like a drumbeat echoing from another world. When he looked at his reflection in the water barrel, he didn't see himself anymore. His skin pulsed faintly, veins glowing with light that moved instead of flowed. Something beneath it stirred. Something alive. He fell to his knees as his bones cracked, reshaping. His scream was swallowed by the sound of wings that weren't wings, folds of flesh unfolding from the air around him. The voice returned, not gentle now, but triumphant. "You opened the door, Oren, now step through." He felt her move inside him, a warmth like molten gold flooding every nerve. It wasn't pain. It was redefinition. Every part of him was rewritten, reformed, made perfect in the demon's image. His heartbeat dissolved into the rhythm of hers, their voices blending until he could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. The transformation was a symphony of sensations, ecstasy and terror, agony and revelation. The smell of ozone filled the air, mingling with incense and blood. His armor split apart as his body expanded, stretching into new forms. His mouth opened, but it wasn't his voice that emerged. It was laughter, low, melodic, and endless. From beyond the camp walls, soldiers watched in horror as the ruin where Oren knelt began to glow. The stones lifted from the ground, swirling in orbit around him like planets around a sun. The air sang, then came the light. It burst from him like dawn through glass, searing and beautiful, burning the ground in patterns that looked like scripture. Every man who looked upon it felt something different. Some fell to their knees and wept. Others clawed at their eyes. Others prayed through the screams. The commissar tried to fire his bolt pistol, but the gun melted in his hand before the round left the chamber. And at the heart of it all, Oren rose. His flesh was smooth and gleaming, his face radiant, his eyes 2 points of golden fire. Behind him unfurled shapes that defied description. Wings, perhaps, or tendrils of liquid light. His voice carried across the wind, soft and resonant. "Don't be afraid," he said, though his mouth did not move. "You wanted peace. I've brought it." The first man to approach disintegrated into ash before he could cry out. The rest turned and ran, leaving behind only their shadows burned into the ground. Above them, the sky began to bleed. By morning, the valley was unrecognizable. The trenches had melted into glassy furrows. The machines of war fused into shapes that seemed carved by worship rather than heat. In the center stood Oren Vale, no longer man, not yet demon, his outline bending the air. Every motion sent ripples through the fabric of the world. To look at him was to feel one's own body rebel, bones aching as if remembering some older, truer shape. The surviving soldiers hid among the ruins, whispering prayers that broke in their throats. Vox units shrieked with static hymns, and every litany came back distorted, his name buried inside the Emperor's. When dawn struck, its light bent around him. Where the sun should have cast shadow, there was only radiance. He walked among the wreckage barefoot, leaving prints that smoked in the dust. Wherever he passed, the wounded ceased screaming. Some rose to their feet, eyes wide with wonder. They reached toward him, trembling as though seeing a saint returned from myth. When his hand brushed theirs, they fell, not dead but transformed. Flesh liquefied, bones dissolved into light. Their souls siphoned into the being that had become Oren. Each body left behind only a husk of luminous ash. Inside him, the demon rejoiced. "This is communion," it sang. "This is purpose." The chorus of consumed voices answered from within his chest, their tones layered like a cathedral choir. For the first time, Oren saw the truth of the galaxy, a single endless hunger disguised as faith. Every god, every prayer, every oath was the same thing, the will to be devoured. He tried to resist, but resistance only deepened the bond. His memories became fuel for the possession. His mother's face, his comrades' laughter, the sound of rain on his helmet, all burned away to feed the fire. The demon shaped what was left into beauty. His skin shimmered with sigils of living gold. His veins pulsed with light that spoke in tongues older than mankind. A storm gathered above, violet and crimson, the warp bleeding into reality. Lightning struck the ground in silent flashes. The world around him twisted, trees blooming with bone, rivers turning to glass, corpses rising only to kneel. Orin's laughter echoed through it all, filled with both joy and despair. And then amid the ruin, something stirred that was not of the demon's making. A column of white-armored figures descended from the sky, an inquisitorial strike force, storm-born and merciless. They landed in formation, their banners marked with the double-headed aquila. At their center strode a woman in black carapace armor, her eyes hidden behind a halo of light refracted through her rosarious field. "In the Emperor's name," she said, her voice amplified through the storm, "you will answer for what you've become." Orin turned toward her. His smile was tender, almost human. "I have," he said softly and spread his arms. The demon's power flared, painting the sky in fire. The Inquisitor's name was Lyra Voss, Ordo Malleus, sworn to the hunting of demons. She had burned worlds for less than what stood before her now. Yet as she looked upon Orin Vale, the radiance spilling from his skin, the strange stillness of his expression, her faith trembled. He was terrible, yes, but beautiful too, like a star collapsing inward on itself. The warp storm above him pulsed with his heartbeat. A vast aurora of ruin and rapture. She raised her bolt pistol, sanctified and blessed by 12 priests of Terra. "In the Emperor's name," she repeated, though her voice faltered at the edges. "Renounce what inhabits you." Orin tilted his head. His eyes shone like molten glass. "I can't," he said gently. "It's not inside me. It's me." The demon's voice spoke through him then, not over his words, but within them. Each syllable carried resonance, like the echo of a cathedral bell heard from within the chest. "She doesn't understand," it said, though its mouth never moved. "None of you do." "We are the prayer," finally answered. Lyra fired. The bolt round struck him square in the heart and stopped. Suspended mid-air, spinning slowly, burning like a miniature sun. The men around her began to shout litanies, pulling triggers until the air filled with flame and thunder. Every round dissolved before it reached him. Then the storm fell silent. Orin walked toward them through the ash, unhurried. With each step the air thickened. The ground trembled beneath his feet, softening, bleeding light. "You think you fight corruption," he said, "but you feed it. Every command, every prayer for vengeance, it all goes to the same place." Lyra reloaded, her lips moving in furious prayer. "You are an echo of damnation," she spat. A lie given form. He stopped a few paces away, the glow dimming. For a moment his face flickered, and she saw the soldier he had been. Mud-caked, frightened, exhausted. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But even lies are born from what's missing." Then the demon stirred again, his body stretched, veins igniting, wings of radiant flesh unfurling into the storm. The voices of the consumed wailed from within him, a choir of agony and awe. Lyra felt it reach into her mind, showing her visions of worlds devoured, of saints made from sin, of the Emperor himself frozen in eternal light. "Look," the voice said through Orin, "and tell me where he ends and I begin." Lyra dropped to one knee, not from faith but from the sheer pressure of his presence. The storm screamed above, lightning bending into spirals of color no mortal eye could bear. Her mind flashed with 1,000 memories that were not hers. His memories. His mother's laughter. His prayers. His death. His rebirth. "Please," she whispered, "if there's any of you left, fight it." For the briefest instant, Orin's expression broke. His glow dimmed to a flicker. "You don't understand," he said, his voice shaking. "I am fighting." Behind his eyes, something immense stirred. The demon roared, a sound like the collapsing of stars, and the light returned, overwhelming, annihilating. The Inquisitor was thrown backward, her armor scorched, her faith shaken. When she rose again, the man was gone. Only the radiance remained. Lyra awoke beneath a sky that no longer belonged to reality. The storm had risen into the upper atmosphere, a vortex of screaming light that swallowed the sun. Her visor flickered, cycling through dead readings, radiation, psychic distortion, atmospheric decay, all meaningless in the face of what she saw. Orin stood at the eye of it, suspended above the ruins, his body both burning and whole. He was neither alive nor dead, neither man nor god. He was the question made flesh. What if faith could no longer tell the difference between salvation and destruction? She tried to stand, but her body resisted, armor fused to her skin by heat and sorcery. Her rosarius flickered, the field around her collapsing in waves. Around her, the soldiers she had led were gone, reduced to dust that shimmered in the wind. Their shapes lingered for moments like after-images, faces half-remembered, smiles trapped in ash. Orin turned his gaze upon her, and for the first time she understood why demons could never truly be destroyed. They didn't come from the warp. They came from us, from the cracks inside every mind that ever prayed for something it didn't deserve. "You called me it," Orin said, his voice now layered, his own and the demons interwoven. "But tell me, Inquisitor, do you not feel the same? The same hunger? The same need to make the Emperor's silence mean something?" Lyra forced herself upright, drawing her chainsword. Its teeth screamed as they ignited, a sound of steel against eternity. "I am his servant," she said, voice trembling with effort. "You are his enemy." Orin smiled, a sad human expression that hurt her more than any heresy. "I was his servant too." The air between them shimmered. Images formed. Orin as he had been, a soldier bleeding in the mud, whispering the Emperor's name into the smoke. Then the same soldier kneeling in golden light, whispering the demon's name with the same devotion. The two moments overlapped until they became indistinguishable. Lyra screamed and swung. The blade struck his chest, carving a trail of light instead of blood. Sparks of impossible color spilled out, painting her armor, her eyes, her thoughts. For a moment she saw through him and into what lay beyond. A realm of endless forms, both divine and hideous, all spiraling around a single truth. There was no difference between worship and hunger. The chainsword went dark. Lyra fell to her knees, her faith unraveling like thread. The demon within Orin laughed softly, not cruelly but almost with pity. "See," it said, "even purity is a mask." Orin reached out his hand. His touch should have burned, but instead it felt cold, familiar. "You can't kill me," he said, "because I never stopped believing." The Inquisitor's vision blurred. She saw him not as a monster, but as a man who had prayed too hard for an answer, and finally received one. "What are you?" she whispered. He looked toward the horizon, where the storm was beginning to fade, the warp retreating from the edges of reality. "I'm what happens when the Emperor answers." The light around him dimmed, his form collapsing inward, dissolving into the air. When it cleared, he was gone. Only the echo of his voice remained, carried on the wind. It was never a possession. It was a confession. Lyra stood alone among the ashes. The storm was gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than sound. She turned toward her shuttle, armor scorched, faith in ruins. In her report to the Ordo Malleus, she would write only one line. Subject Orin Vale. Fate unknown. Possible metaphysical dissolution. Warp breach closed. She would not mention the word that echoed in her dreams afterward, the word that had followed Orin's voice into her own prayers. Mercy. When the storm finally broke, the world of Carthene fell quiet. The air smelled of dust and ozone. The sky, once bleeding, was now pale and empty. The Imperial Guard returned days later to find nothing but glass plains and the faint outlines of trenches baked into the soil. There were no survivors, no corpses, only the faint hum of energy, as though the earth itself was trying to remember what it used to be. Inquisitor Lyra Voss watched from the command deck of her strike cruiser, Vigilant Mercy, orbiting the dead world below. The data slates were blank, the auspex readings silent. Even the ship's choir of sanctioned psychers refused to scry the surface. They said the warp was quiet there, not cleansed, not pure, just quiet. And that terrified them more than any storm. Lyra hadn't slept since the encounter. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Orin's face, radiant, broken, at peace. The echo of his words lingered. It was never a possession. It was a confession, a riddle that would not leave her. In her quarters, the candles guttered in recycled air. She sat before the Aquila, her armor stripped away, the prayers of the Ministorum whispering from the Vox shrine. She recited each one, voice steady, as if the repetition could repair her faith. But faith, she had learned, was not something that broke all at once. It frayed quietly, thread by thread, until one day you looked down and saw the truth beneath it. Her hand trembled as she reached for her rosarius. It was cracked now, a single fracture down the center of the crystal. The symbol of divine protection that had always glowed with soft light now pulsed weakly, as if it too were afraid. She thought of the golden throne. of the Emperor's unending silence, of the millions sacrificed daily to keep that silence alive. And she wondered for the first time in her life if the demon had lied at all. The ship's vox crackled. "Inquisitor," came the voice of her pilot, uncertain, hushed. "The surface readings just changed. There's movement." A signal. Her blood ran cold. "From where?" "Deep within the storm's center, ma'am." "It's faint, but it's a hymn." Lyra rose slowly, her reflection wavering in the steel of her desk. For a moment she thought she saw two faces staring back, hers and another softer, golden-eyed. "Patch it through," she said. The hymn filled the chamber. It was faint, distorted, like a choir singing through a dream. But she knew the voice immediately. Oren's. It was not a prayer. It was not even a warning. It was something else, something between sorrow and serenity. "We are not lost," the voice sang. "We are found within the flame." Lyra gripped the edge of the console, every muscle in her body tightening. The candles guttered again, their flames bending toward the vox like supplicants. She whispered before she could stop herself. "Oren?" The lights flickered. The air grew heavy. "Do not fear the fire," the voice answered. "The Emperor burns too." The signal cut. Silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was listening. Lyra turned toward the window, the pale world below gleaming like a dying ember. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes glowing faintly gold. She did not sleep that night. She only prayed, though she no longer knew to whom. Days passed, but the voice never truly left her. It lingered in the air between vox transmissions, in the static of the prayer hymns, in the rhythm of her own heartbeat. When Lyra spoke the Emperor's name, she could almost hear Oren whispering beneath it. "The Emperor burns too." She tried to silence it through ritual. She bathed in sanctified oil until her skin blistered. She burned relics from her youth and reswore the oaths of the Ordo Malleus beneath the sigil of the Inquisition. Yet the more she purified herself, the stronger the echo became. The ship's psychers began to scream in their cells, convulsing with visions of light. They called it the resonance. The resonance spread. Vox choristers reported hearing hymns when no transmissions were active. Tech priests claimed the machine spirits were dreaming. In the Medicaid decks, dying soldiers began murmuring the same phrase in their final moments. "We are found within the flame." At first, Lyra thought it contagion, a mimetic echo of warp exposure. But when she entered the navigator's sanctum, she saw the impossible. The Astronomican itself flickering in the void. Not dimming, breathing. The beacon's rhythm pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and measured, as though the light of the Emperor was answering something unseen. She ordered the ship locked down. No communications, no prayers, only silence. But silence, she realized too late, was how it entered. That night, as the crew slept, the lights dimmed to gold. The air tasted of iron and incense. Lyra woke to find her reflection standing before her bed, not mirrored but watching. Its eyes were bright, its expression calm. "You came back," she whispered. The reflection smiled. "I never left." She reached for her weapon, but her arm would not move. Every part of her body felt bound by unseen gravity. The reflection stepped closer and the world bent around it. "You called me Lyra," it said. Not Oren's voice, not the demon's, but both blended into something vast and mournful. "Every prayer you ever spoke was a wish to be seen. I see you now." Tears stung her eyes, though she didn't know why. "If this is damnation," she said softly, "then why does it feel like peace?" The figure leaned forward, its form flickering between light and shadow. "Because damnation was always just love that outgrew its cage." The room trembled. The rosarius around her neck shattered, its crystal flaring once, then turning to ash. Lyra's breath caught as warmth flooded her chest. Not fire, not pain, but light, filling every hollow part of her that faith had abandoned. The figure reached out. "You fought for him your whole life, but tell me, did he ever fight for you?" For the first time, Lyra didn't answer. She simply let go. The ship's sensors recorded what happened next as a psionic flare of undefined origin. The vigilant Mercy vanished from orbit, its silhouette dissolving into the same golden radiance that had consumed Oren Vale. For a single moment, the Astronomican brightened, visible even from the edge of Segmentum Solar. Then it dimmed again, as if drawing breath. In the silence that followed, across 1,000 worlds, countless souls paused mid-prayer. Some felt warmth. Others wept without knowing why. No one ever found the wreckage of the vigilant Mercy. Only a fragment of its transmission survived. Distorted beyond recognition, just a voice, distant and quiet, speaking words once whispered in a trench long ago. The Emperor protects, even from himself. The signal ended, and somewhere far beyond the light of Terra, the warp stirred like a tide returning home.